One of the things that is really important to me is the implementation of the recommendations.
Tonight, we hear from a BC woman who says the most important election issue is the implementation of the MMIWG calls to action.
And wanted to find a way to give back, so it's a fundraising dinner from our community for our community.
A center in Edmonton that helps the homeless is raising money for a full-time shelter.
I hope that they see themselves, if they are, Indigenous youth, that they are represented in superhero culture and pop culture.
And the traveling exhibit When Raven Becomes Spider makes a stop in Winnipeg. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Shingwalk Residential School was one of 130 schools operated by governments and churches during a century of aggressive assimilation of Indigenous children. More than a decade after Canada's apology to survivors, university leaders are at Shingwalk to talk reconciliation and to learn. Willa Fiddler brings us this from Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario.
It's been almost 5 years since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released its calls to action. Not long after, Universities Canada responded with an annual gathering of university presidents from across the country. Now in its 5th year, 22 university presidents have converged at the historic Shingwalk Residential School, now home to Algoma University. Daniel Weeks is president of the University of Northern British Columbia, one of the co-hosts of this year's event. He's also from Sault Ste. Marie and says Shingwalk was the right place for this year's Building Reconciliation Forum.
It's a very important place. It's an incredibly sacred place, and I think it was important for all the university presidents to come here to really reflect on what we've been trying to do for the last 5 years and the kind of progress we've made and where do we want to go next.
Shingwalk is one of 130 residential schools run by the government and churches from the 1800s to the 1990s.
The reward we got back was having our children taken to residential schools.
Mike Kakagi is the director of the Ontario Indian Residential School Support Services. Shingwalk was one of 3 residential schools he attended as a child. He's not sold on reconciliation efforts, and he's not afraid to tell that to the academic leaders who came here to learn.
I'm telling them about the story and the facade of reconciliation. And I did the cemetery, and I was telling them that, until we recognize and what happened to those children there with no voices today, and somebody gives them a voice, we can never reconcile.
Kakagi is talking about the cemetery where students and staff are buried on site, including a priest he refers to as one of the predators. What's the response you get when you...
They were quiet. They were stunned. And I think that's what we have to do. And I always tell them, I'm not here to put blame on you. It's a part of your history that you have to deal with, not mine. It's not my history. It's yours.
Delegates also took to the field for lessons from local traditional games.
Yeah, so the game is Bugger Away Win, and it's our version of lacrosse as Anishinaabe people. Our game is like contemporary lacrosse, but it's our unique game. It's not the Haudenosaunee style or Iroquois style of lacrosse. It's like ours is Anishinaabe, meaning the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi.
Mishin Miigwan Shawanda says it was traditionally used to solve disputes between families, communities, and nations.
What we're trying to explain is, again, healthy bodies, healthy minds, and the mindset that we need to have when we're pursuing education. We can't be confined into 4 walls and underneath a rule or underneath a roof.
Weeks said more than 200 delegates will hear from Indigenous academics and elders this week as they look ahead to the next 5 years.
And I think it's also important to realize this is not a gimmick. This is not a short game. This is a very long game, and we have to realize that 25 years from now, 50 years from now, what do we want our post-secondary system to look like? What will success look like from that point of view?
Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Sault Ste. Marie.
APTN conducted a national Indigenous federal election poll. People surveyed said that the environment and climate change is their #1 issue. However, one woman living in British Columbia says her most important issue is violence against women. Laurie Hamlin has her story.
Jan Atkinson, born in Doig River, has suffered abuse throughout her life, starting at a very young age.
The first time I think I was sexually abused, I was 3. That's the first memory that I have, approximately 3.
She married a man that eventually forced her into being his sex slave and human trafficking.
You know, originally you're sucked in by love and all that, and then eventually it turns into a fear, and there's absolutely no way to leave. And then they get you to do things, and then those things are what are held against you later on.
It took 10 years before Atkinson finally got away, and she did it without help or support during and after the abuse.
There's nothing in our society that is supportive. I remember calling a crisis line, and they're like, well, are you safe right now? Or are you going to call the cops? Or we can get you in for an appointment next week. Next week doesn't work, right? It's now.
Atkinson felt helpless. She says she not only couldn't find support, but that she was judged and not believed. She now lives in Kamloops helping other abuse victims.
People have an inability to understand what it is they haven't experienced, right? So then they sit in judgment. And I don't think there is anything worse than being a victim and having trauma or society re-traumatize you again and again. You know, if you come out about human trafficking, or if you come out about being sexually assaulted, or you come out about struggling with PTSD, or you come out with any of that, you're stigmatized.
Atkinson never got justice for any of the abuse she suffered, and in order to finally be heard, she testified at the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry in Vancouver.
I wanted some acknowledgement. I wanted to be believed. I wanted to be heard. We do not have a justice system. Our justice system doesn't work. Whether it's a breakdown within the RCMP or the local police force, or whether it's a breakdown within government, or whether it's a breakdown, you know, with victim services.
Atkinson says her priority for choosing a leader in the upcoming federal election is a party that recognizes the crisis with violence against women and implements the calls to action in the National Inquiry's final report.
One of the things that is really important to me is the implementation of the recommendations, the acknowledgement that genocide has existed, and the truth and reconciliation, right? It's really like a sick family dynamic, right? We're just becoming sicker as a society, and I think until we take the means to acknowledge what has happened, then we just simply can't fix what the problem is.
Lori Hamlin, APTN National News, Kamloops.
A center in Edmonton that helps the homeless is benefiting from a fundraiser, and it's the very people who need the help who are doing the fundraising. APTN's Chris Stewart was there.
For over 35 years, the Mustard Seed has been helping people who need a little support. A meal, dry clothes and socks, a warm place to sleep. They offer help in Kamloops, Red Deer, Calgary, and Edmonton. Thousands of lives impacted. Now, some of the community members in Edmonton are paying it forward. Amanda Adkins was talking to a couple of community members when one of them had the idea for them to organize their own fundraiser for the Mustard Seed.
They thought maybe we could do a soup and bannock night, or we could do something like that. And so we started taking it out to members of the community, and everybody was amazing about jumping on board and supporting the community members and finding a way to come together to be able to support them.
Mustard Seed has run as a drop-in center, but now they would like to also have a full-time shelter. The money raised will help pay for that shelter. Local businesses were on board, donating the food, catering, music. The community members helped serve the dinners to the sold-out tables.
We run an emergency winter shelter. We started last year. We're looking to do it again this year. And our community, some of them who stayed in the shelter the year before, really wanted to give back because they had gotten housed and wanted to find a way to give back. So it's a fundraising dinner from our community for our community.
Mike Forsyth has been using the Mustard Seed for almost a year. Tonight, he is the co-master of ceremonies.
Tonight is a night for us to invite our neighbors in, and for us as a community to give back to them, to say thank you. We're here to serve them. It's kind of a reversal of fortune, I would say.
Sharon Johnson is thrilled to be giving something back to the place that helped her.
It's a great feeling. I love it.
What are you doing here tonight?
Oh, I volunteered my time. This is me. I'm just going to share it about and just be my bubbly self and just make sure that people connect with one another.
Just my way of saying thank you, and kind of maybe to be an inspiration to other community members that, you know, with a little perseverance and a little hard work, you can do it too.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
APTN continues to shine the spotlight on the child welfare system in this country. When we come back, reporter Kenneth Jackson talks about his latest work. And here's a look at what's coming up on the season premiere of Nation to Nation right after tonight's news.
And very shortly, we'll be bringing you the season premiere of Nation to Nation. We'll be looking at the disgraceful state of Indigenous child welfare, especially in Ontario, where 102 deaths have occurred over the past 5 years. Cindy Blackstock wonders why there has been little said about it during an election campaign. And how could the feds appeal a human rights tribunal order for compensation? As well, we'll speak to a professor from Ryerson University who says chronic underfunding is allowing children to die. And we'll hear heartbreaking stories from 2 youths caught up in the system. That's coming up immediately after the national news.
Off to the east, we've got 16 and a mix of sun and cloud in Fredericton, 13 in St. John's and sunshine. The Grand River will be 15 and sunshine, Cartwright 18 and sunny. Quebec City will be mostly sunny with 15 degrees, Gaspé with 13 and sunshine. Ottawa will be 17 and sunny, 20 in London and sunshine. Kapuskasing will be rainy, 18 degrees, as is Timmins, 6 in Big Trout Lake. Thompson, 4 degrees, Churchill, sunshine, and 3. Snow for Winnipeg and 5 degrees, 1 in snow in Brandon. 7 and sunny in Saskatoon, 4 and sunny in Regina and Yorkton. 5s for Stony Rapids, Buffalo Narrows, La Ronge, and lots of sun up in northern Saskatchewan. Welcome back. APTN first broke the story death as expected a couple weeks ago. Approximately 102 Indigenous kids died while connected to the Ontario's child welfare system over a 5-year period. It was a result of several years of work done by Nation to Nation producer Kenneth Jackson. He joins me now from Ottawa to talk about the story and what has happened since. Kenneth, this was some incredible journalism. Your story had clocked in at more than 5,000 words. Can you just summarize for people who may not have read it or seen it yet what your investigation revealed?
Well, let me just start with, for me, Death is Expected started in 2017 with the death of 4 First Nation girls in 6 months. I thought it was a big deal, and it is a big deal. Anytime a kid dies when they're pulled from their home for their safety and they die in child welfare, that's an issue, and it is a big deal, and it should create headlines. And there was 4 in 6 months, and it went a little quiet. And then in February 2018, I got a video of Kaya Sutura, one of the girls who died, killing herself, and it was in a Suliko foster home. And I ended up doing 17 stories on that, on that young girl's death over the next year. But I kept wondering and seeing there's more people dying out there, more kids dying than what was being reported. And so I wanted to figure out the total number. I wanted to figure out why, and I went at it hard as I could. And what we came up with was 102 deaths over 5 years, 2013 to end of 2017, and it's 102 deaths with kids connected to child welfare in Ontario, mostly Northern Ontario, where mostly these places most of the agencies are Indigenous, and they're underfunded by hundreds of millions of dollars, purposely underfunded. This is not us saying it, that's a tribunal saying it, Cindy Blackstock, and we proved it with data.
Yeah. What's the reaction to the story been like?
You know what, some people think there hasn't been enough, but I don't really, I look at it differently. I see the Globe and Mail asking Trudeau a question, I see the Globe and Mail asking Scheer a question, I see Don Martin on Power Play talking about it over and over again, had me on. Other people are talking about it. It's become an issue. It's not, I compare it to blackface because blackface is so easy to understand. You see someone blackface and you go, that's completely wrong. Obviously 102 kids dying is wrong, but there's a lot of reasons, like backstory to why that happened, and it's been centuries of chronic underfunding, chronic, purposely, the stories that our viewers know about. It's not, it's not a secret.
Yeah. Do you think that there's collectively a greater awareness among people that kids are in care? Like, I think everybody has a basis of understanding that the child welfare system isn't really working in this country. Do you think that there's a greater understanding now among average citizens that there's a lot of kids that are in care that should never be in care?
Well, I'm gonna plug your work and my work because I think both of us, you and I, work really hard to tell everyone what's going on and to understand something. When you look back at the residential school era, and it's horrific. We're dealing with the same thing right now, if not worse, and there's 2 reporters working on this full time, basically. It's you and me. And we're trying to educate the public. I think people are getting it because we're laying bare the facts. Like, tonight on Nation to Nation, our whole show was dedicated to it. Same with your show last night, or yesterday on In Focus. We're putting all of our means to educate the public so that they know what is going on.
Well, that's, I guess, what keeps us going. What's going to keep you reporting next? Where do you go?
It might have been 5,500 words that is expected, but there's 10,000, 20,000 more words to tell. I'm digging into Crown wards in Ontario. I'm really focusing on Ontario because Northern Ontario, to me, is a petri dish of colonization. There's so many huge issues up there, from lack of water, lack of resources, lack of everything. And so I really focus on Ontario while you work, in the West. I'm going to really dig into the Crown wards and some more issues. Enforce the Ontario government to get me a tally of how many Indigenous kids in Ontario are in care. I want that right now.
I love it. I have much respect for what you do, Kenneth, and thanks for sharing with us. We look forward to what's coming up next.
Right on. Thank you.
We want to hear what you think. Here's how you can continue the conversation. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptnnews. You can also follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. Another recurring story is housing for Indigenous people in Canada, both on and off reserve. It seems to be a never-ending crisis. So how did the situation come about, and why is it seemingly impossible to solve? APTN Investigates reporter Christopher Reed set out across the country to find out. Here's a sneak peek at part 1 of the season 11 premiere of APTN Investigates, Healing Housing.
On-reserve housing in Canada seems to be in a kind of never-ending crisis, to the point sometimes that even new reserve homes have problems.
My flooring here where all the water was, and it's coming through all the baseboards here, all the way through. Even it drips right there. This is discoloring because of that, and this is the water that's coming through the floor, and you could feel it every time you walk through it.
Yeah, and when you press your foot there,
it's water, and all along here.
This house is 18 months old.
All along the baseboards here, it is growing up. We keep washing it with Javix here to make it look, but it's not going nowhere. And I believe this is where all the water is going into the ductwork through here. This vent, that's where all the water is entering into the ductwork that's in the basement.
The problems with Bernice McKenzie's new home may be on the extreme end of the spectrum, but they are rooted in systemic issues that have plagued First Nations housing since the federal government took the driver's seat in the 1930s.
You can watch the entire episode of Healing Housing Part 1 after the national news on Friday night. You may notice something new this year with APTN Investigates. Episodes will now be presented in 2 parts to bring you more in-depth coverage of the issues. Indigenous business leaders from around the globe are in Vancouver. We check in with them after the break. But first, here's the rest of tomorrow's weather forecast. Off to northern Alberta. We've got 10 in sunshine in Peace River, 9 in sunny and high level. 9 and sunny in Edmonton, 9 and sunny in Calgary, 8 and sunny in Medicine Hat. Tofino will be 12 degrees in sunshine, same with Campbell River, 11 in Penticton. Sandspit will be rainy, along with Prince Rupert, 12 degrees in those communities. Mayo and Whitehorse, rain and 7. Dawson City, 5 and cloud. Wrigley, Fort Simpson, Trout Lake, Fort Layard, 7 degrees and sunny. Inuvik will be snowy and 1, same with Tuck. Paulatuck, a mix of sun and cloud and 1 degree. 0 with a mix of sun and cloud in Cambridge Bay, -2 with a mix of sun and cloud in Chesterfield. Igloolik, mix of sun and cloud, -1. Arctic Bay, some snow and -2. Welcome back. Indigenous entrepreneurs from around the world were in Vancouver at the 10th Annual World Indigenous Business Forum. Here's Tina House with more.
A reception was held at the Bill Reid Gallery in downtown Vancouver to launch the annual World Indigenous Business Forum. Andrew Carrier is the chair of the forum. He says the event is a chance to support Indigenous entrepreneurs in other parts of the world and to infuse close to $5 million in the local economy just by having it here.
What is really exciting is the opportunity to do international business. We have, for example, in Peru, where they do the sashes, and we purchase a sash from them. Colombia, we are able to over $300,000 in coffee contract or purchase contract coffee with Indigenous farmers.
And one of those in attendance was Darren Godwell. He works with a multinational company based in Australia, but operates in various countries, focusing on overseas aid and development.
For a company with global operations like we do, connecting with Indigenous businesses is really a key part of why we're looking at networking opportunities such as this. So being able to sit down with Indigenous brothers and sisters from around the world in one location is it's invaluable, really.
Alfred Leah is First Nation from Pine Dock, Manitoba. He launched his company, Tomahawk Chips, in 2015 and has found a way to incorporate Indigenous artwork with every bag of chips that he sells.
Headquarters in Riverton, Manitoba, and I have warehousing and the plants in Mississauga, and I have another facility in Madera, California, and one in Perry, Florida, and I do the chips internationally.
At the forum, close to 700 delegates gathered to hear from numerous speakers and panels, including this one on Indigenous tourism and how it can be applied worldwide.
Of course, Indigenous tourism is not always about economics. At the community level, there are several other benefits that it brings back and other programs and other supports and things that come out of developing tourism experiences that are kind of spin-off benefits.
Carrier has some advice for those interested in getting into business.
Look at opportunities and don't limit yourself to what the government has to offer. You have to find a niche and to serve your community, but don't be afraid to ask questions as to what is needed in that community.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
That is your news for this Thursday. If you missed Kenneth Jackson's death as expected, you can find it on our website, aptnnews.ca. You can also find yesterday's season premiere of In Focus on that website, too. It also focuses on the child welfare system. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Stay tuned now for Nation to Nation's new season premiere. Have a great night.